I think you hit on something that's hugely important, and a lot of martial arts teachers have felt a little bit of that pushback once in a while, where if you're not somebody who knows how to stay safe, then you sometimes perceive people who do approach life from that position as being afraid, of being insulated, of being armored. And I think early in our process of training in self-defense, we kind of do that. I think it's like the pupil stage of becoming a martial artist. But when you are safe and you know you're safe, or you know how to stay safe, that does, as you say, it opens up opportunities.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Conversations from the Heart. Today, we are joined by Mr. Jason Brick. He's up in Hillsboro, Oregon. Mr. Brick, how are you doing this morning?
Fantastic. How about your own selves, gentlemen?
We're doing great. We're doing great. So, Mr. Brick, we're very excited to sit down and talk with you today. For most of our students, they don't know who you are, even though I know you're a very accomplished martial artist, writer, done a lot of things. And I want to talk to you today a little bit about this upcoming book that you have. But before we get started on that, can you tell my students a little bit about your martial arts training, how you got started, what inspired you to continue on that path, and where are you today?
Absolutely. So I like to say that my self-defense training began in third grade when I joined my elementary school's cross-country team, because avoiding injury through rapid flight remains my favorite form of self-defense. I got into martial arts when I was 11 years old, when I joined my middle school wrestling team. Did that through middle school and high school. Got into college, and I wasn't insane enough to be a college wrestler. I don't know if you guys know college wrestlers, but they are nuts. They are insane. And so I wasn't quite ready for that. And I did spent about 3 years doing those elective classes, little taekwondo here, little aikido there, some fencing, etc. And then there's a Kempo school within walking distance of my dorm, and I ended up there and was fortunate enough that the staff there was amazing. And so Kempo has been my home art now that was like 1993. So good Lord, coming on to 30 years. And I've trained in Kempo fairly consistently, but along the way, I've done some capoeira, some Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I've, if there's a seminar, I'll go take it. I've been feeding my martial arts habit for a very long time. Did some Muay Thai there in the 90s when I was still young and dumb and my joints didn't hurt. and yeah, so I continue to train in Kempo and Goju Shori weapons right now.
That's awesome. And do you have a school right now?
I do some seminars and some, until before the COVID lockdown, I was teaching the neighborhood kids out of my garage. I ran a school for most of the 2000s. But then just for me, because running the school is an evening and weekends job, when I had my kids, for me, that just wasn't the kind of dad I wanted to be. So I shifted my career at that time. Yes. And what I will say, you mentioned that I make my living as a freelance writer now, and I would not have been able to do that if it were not for the personal discipline and work ethic of being in the martial arts community for so long.
Yes, sir. There you go.
Honestly, it is as though that entire industry is moving through molasses in slow motion.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. What a story. And sounds like you're actually pretty similar to myself. I started out in, a traditional martial art like Taekwondo, and done that my whole life. But along the way, of course, we are so curious and we want to learn it all. And so we explore and try new things and grow and develop. And I think that's the mark of a good martial artist, one who's got an open mind, because there are some people who get stuck in their ways and get kind of insular, but that's very exciting. So tell us a little bit about this book, and how you got started and what it's about.
Sure thing. So a little bit of backstory there. About coming out of 2 years ago, I started a podcast called Safest Family on the Block, which is where I took my lens as a martial artist for almost 40 years, and a father for 21 combined years, and a journalist, freelance writer for the last 13. And I interview subject matter experts about how to keep our kids safe. And that's everything from, my very first episode was a paramedic. I've had a CIA agent, a suicide counselor, communication specialists. I'm trying to get a driving instructor or an insurance adjuster on there to talk about that, but trying to really broaden the perspective of safety, because most of the time when people think about family safety, they're going to go take some kind of concealed carry class on the weekend,
Right.
but they may or may not put the seatbelt on while they drive to it. And so I wanted to, first of all, have this excuse to talk with really knowledgeable people about stuff I want to learn, but also to broaden the viewpoint on what family safety was. And then one of the things that came out of that was I had a series of stone badasses on the podcast. Rory Miller came on, Nick Hughes, Tony Blauer is going to be coming on for this next episode. Legitimate tough guys, bodyguards, CIA agents, and every single one of them would say something about how much more important avoiding a fight was than winning a fight, or defining winning a fight as avoiding the fight in the first place. And if you look at the literature in martial arts, we don't really pay nearly as much attention to that as we should. We got lots of, hundreds, thousands of books on how to avoid a punch landing on you or how to deal with somebody who throws a punch. Very few books on how to not have that person throw a punch in the first place. So I had this idea and I pitched it to some of these same stone badasses, and they were behind it 100%. And the book's called There I Was When Nothing Happened. And it's a collection of stories from these people about a time they avoided violence through using skills like evasion, preparation, awareness, de-escalation through humor, de-escalation through intimidation, or simply running like hell.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Jesse was prepping me for this interview and he was telling me about your book, and he said it was a working title, but I said, man, that's the best title I've heard in a long time. That's really good.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I've been trying to come up with a better title because I'm not great at titles, but everybody I say is like, no, that one's going to work, buddy.
Yes,
that's gonna...
Well, it's both poetic, but also so important, because I think a lot of young buck martial artists think that the only thing that matters is when it's exciting, but a lot of the hard work is done when it's not exciting.
Absolutely.
The strength is made in the little actions along the way and not the big event that may or may not ever come.
No, absolutely. And that applies to so many aspects of our training. Even that moment in your 20s training when you realize that you're getting bored during the push-ups instead of tired, right?
Yes.
That point that we all got to at some point, but that's again that you do that next 100 push-ups, not because it's exciting, not because you're struggling, but to grow as a martial artist and as a person. And then I think most martial artists have that experience where you could have made the wrong decision and gone and had something that seemed like one of those scenes in the bars in the old Westerns, but instead you got in your car and went home. And to really underscore that is so much more of a victory than going in and risking your health, your freedom, your financial stability, your ability to take care of your family or even see your family again. That's the real victory.
Yeah. Well, I am definitely going to be picking up your book when it comes out. Where is it going to be appearing?
So we're going to use doing a Kickstarter model for it.
Okay.
And as of tomorrow, we'll have the preview page up on the Kickstarter, and then it'll be live for backers on the 21st of February and run through March 17th, I think. Don't necessarily quote me on the 17th, because I didn't think to bring a piece of paper with that written down on, and I've been hit in the head a lot.
No problem. Well, get us that information and we'll link it
I absolutely
to the video so that they can check you out. One of the reasons I brought it up, because I would love to get my hands on a book like that. And I think I'm not alone. I think there's a lot of martial arts instructors out there that are really looking for those answers. In the industry, one of the number one topics of discussion is, verbal judo or anti-bullying strategies. And, it's a complicated topic. There's some sort of philosophical landmines to kind of navigate, as well as it's a topic that after 31 years in the martial arts, I have to be honest, I haven't been exposed to as much as I would like from my instructors. Maybe a few snippets here and there, but we talk a lot more about how to punch and when to punch, and not so much, well, how do you de-escalate violence so that you don't have to even get in that situation. But I think it's something that would be so valuable. It's ultimately the goal, the highest goal of the martial arts. I was really inspired by Morihei Ueshiba's concept of, subduing your opponent without hurting them. But you and I both know that that's an incredibly hard feat to do. It's a little bit romantic, although, if I can, I will. But I think the easiest way to do that in the fight, it may be almost impossible, but but if you do it before the fight with that verbal judo, then it's very possible.
Absolutely. And I've divided the book into 5 sections that kind of create a curriculum. And the stories, each of the stories falls into at least one of these different categories, starting with preparation. What can you do before you even show up at the situation to reduce your chances of being victimized? One of the things, and this goes right to what you're saying about bullying training, that one of the issues with being a martial artist for a long time, by the time you've been a martial artist long enough that people ask you for your advice about bullying, because martial arts train out that victim vibe, it's been a decade since you were bullied. We might not be the most qualified people to talk to people about bullying. It's been a minute.
Yeah.
Or things like when you travel with your family, making sure that your hotel's in a decent neighborhood. Those are ways to avoid violence and confrontation. And then moving from there to situational awareness, being in the bar and noticing that, hey, everybody just left, right? Or everybody's watching that guy who just walked in.
Yeah.
And then from that avoidance into, excuse me, into, sorry, that was awareness, then avoidance about ways to get around things, move away, not get into the confrontation. Then the de-escalation, which is your verbal judo, which is sometimes raw intimidation, using humor. And then finally to escape, where, okay, if I don't move quickly in that direction right now, I might get into a fight. And just making sure that everybody knows that it's okay to, run. I do love, what we used to call it, shudo, right? Nike fu. Right. Like one of the stories I'll include there is from that CIA agent who carries a $5 bill around.
Yeah.
And if he thinks it's going to get ugly, he drops the $5 bill because the eyes will follow the $5 bill.
Yeah.
And that gives you the quarter of a second you need to turn tail and run.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
And I'd spend $5 to not get into a fight any day of the week.
Yeah.
It's like Batman, like with the smoke bomb. Boom.
Yeah, exactly. It's a smoke bomb. It's a smoke bomb they won't take away when you go through airport security.
Right.
Yeah, there you go. That's awesome. When you were talking about awareness, situational awareness, it kind of made a couple of things click to me too. Like, this is not only really interesting to the parents who are looking for the kids not to be bullied, but could also be potentially interest to veteran martial artists, because one of the things that we all do once we've done the martial arts for a little while is we start running through endless scenarios, self-defense scenarios, and a lot of those are, trying to figure out how to, resolve the situation. And a lot of times we're not even thinking about verbally resolving it. We're thinking, okay, I'm sitting down here. I want to have my face to the door so I know if someone comes in, and if they come in, I'm going to go this way, and I'm going to try these things. But let's remember that there's another layer, which is, that verbal, I don't know if you want to call it verbal judo or violence de-escalation, but yeah.
Any of those, we can attach any kind of label or brand name to it, but it's all just using your words so you don't have to use your hands. And one of the things in the martial arts industry that we do really poorly is we'll spar, we'll do pressure drills, pressure testing, endless repetitions. But when was the last time you drilled on being, quick thinking with your words?
Right. Yes, sir.
Right. I would absolutely encourage every martial artist out there who's serious about self-defense to go up, spend 6 months taking an improv class.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's good advice.
Right? I mean, that pressure test your words.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm sure you experience at your school and we experience all the time is we get a lot of moms that come in, their kids being bullied at school, and they want their kid to be able to defend themselves against the bully. But I think what they really want is not actually that, because I was a kid once. I started doing martial arts when I was 5, and I've always been a martial artist as far as I can remember. And I will tell you that in my adolescence, when I was in school and stuff, just beating somebody up doesn't work, because you look like a monster. Okay, you have to be really careful, like when and how you do it. It has to be very, very clear, everybody around you, that this person is attacking you and they want to harm you, and they let that play out, and there's nothing else you can do, and then you can defend yourself. Because if you jump the gun too soon, like this person's saying all these terrible things to you, and they're getting up in your face, and then you think, okay, well, this is the moment for me to attack. You could attack too soon, and then everyone thinks you took the situation to this radically too high a level, and you're a monster. And so this is one of the problems, I think, with the parents when they come in. They say, well, I want you to be able to teach my kid to defend himself. Well, what could happen is, maybe you give them some physical confidence. So now when someone says some mean words to them, they don't shrink and step back, but instead move forward and engage. But they engage, and then they beat up the kid. And then now they're thought of as the bully in the school, and they get ostracized and isolated. And it's actually a worse thing. And the one thing that I always want to tell parents when they come in is, like, what you really want is you want a leader. You want me to turn your son or daughter into a leader, so that everyone looks up to them and no one even thinks about bullying them, because that's the kind of verbal judo that is going to allow that to not even happen. I mean, I think you hear a lot of people, I'm sure you experience too, they come in, they say, oh, I've been in so many fights, blah, blah, blah. It's like, if you're getting a lot of fights, there's a problem there.
Yeah.
You're going around looking for them.
Now, what was the, who was I interviewing? I think it was Tony Blair, about how you see these self-defense instructors who say, I've been in 200 fights. It's like, man, you're not very good at self-defense. You might be great at fighting.
Yeah.
But if you're letting things go, if you're getting into a tussle once a week for 4 years, yeah, man, you need to work on your self-defense skills. And that's what I would say when I had those parents who wanted to have a kid who was being bullied about, I want you to teach them to defend themselves. I make it very clear that I will teach them physical skills that if they need to, but that's the tip of the iceberg on self-defense. Then we're going to talk about their confidence and how they stand and how they move, so that the bully who's looking for the easy target isn't going to come up. We're going to talk about staying calm in an emergency, so you can access humor or self-deprecation, or the adult that's right over there that's not seeing it, and think to do that under stress. We're going to learn these skills. We're going to turn you into a leader, so that you're not the person that people look to bully, but rather the person who people who are being bullied come stand next to, so that the bullies are going to go somewhere else. That's what we're going to teach. And all of that is self-defense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So if you had, I mean, I know your book is wide sweeping and there's probably a lot of great advice in there, but if you had to just give, one little tidbit that you have in that book, some bit of wisdom that you learned along the way, putting that book together, what would that be?
So I'll go with kind of there's a overarching theme, and then there's also a pretty cool anecdote that I won't tell all of, because the guy tells it way better and as he presents it, but it's really cool. But the overarching theme is just as alpha males who were interested in martial arts, internalizing that permission to walk away from a challenge for a fight, which is very, very, very hard for a lot of us. To really understanding that if there's some guy on the bus who's being loud and obnoxious and calling you out, saying filthy things about your spouse, there's a part of us, because of many aspects of our culture, some of which are good and just often misapplied, that would find it very, very difficult not to walk up to that guy and pop him right in the snout. But is that really how we take care of our families? We're talking about a guy could have a knife, and maybe we can deal with a knife, maybe we can't. Right? Knives are scary, even for highly advanced martial artists. If you talk to an advanced martial artist who's not afraid of knives, you're talking to somebody who's fibbing about their martial arts skills. Right? But even if you handle that, you've got hepatitis, HIV, other bloodborne illnesses that you have to deal with, let alone what the police might think about it, let alone about what that guy's uncle's lawyer is going to do with you a year later. And none of interacting with zero of those things is actually protecting your spouse. And, we save our skills for when someone is trying to hurt us, somebody we love, or an innocent bystander. And our egos need to never be a part of that decision. And it's very, very hard for us to really internalize that. But one of the reasons that I'm really excited about how this book is shaping up is that we're hearing again and again and again from top players in the self-defense and violence game that, yeah, they give themselves that permission all the time. That their ego is not threatened by some loudmouth at a bar.
Yeah, I mean, that is just the legality of that. That's a really important thing to bring up too. I had a friend in college. He told me the story that he was a lot older than us. He was in his mid-30s or something, and he was going to college for the first time, I thought. And he was also a martial artist, and he was in my program. And he told me the story of how he there was this girl when he first got to the college, like 15 years ago, who was in a verbal argument with her boyfriend, and her boyfriend's like hit her in the face. And he stepped in, got between the two of them, and ended up fighting this guy. And I think he like fell on his head on the concrete or something, and I think he died. And the woman was like pissed at him. He had to go to jail for a long time, and that's why he was just going to college then. And it was this horrible thing. It was like he was trying to help this lady, but it turned out to be basically a disaster and ruined his life. And I think a lot of people, hopefully a lot of people are aware of that, and that makes them reluctant to get into fights. But it's definitely something that you should be, because it's ugly. Fighting is ugly, and I think it gets the wrong appearance with movies and stuff like that. Like, oh, it's going to be a few simple kicks and the person's down, and you'll just be able to brush your hands off and walk away and you'll be a hero. But that's not how it works,
No. And I think that our industry, we tend to glorify is not the right word, but trivialize violence, where we'll get in the class and there'll be a seminar and someone will walk us through some technique, and we'll all be giggling a little bit about how that technique's breaking their arm in 4 places, and then we stomp on their groin. And we all like, that's cool. Right? and we all have part of that, but I think that we often forget that sanitized violence is not what it looks like and not what it feels like. That there's this fantasy violence we have in the dojo that we see on the screen that is very, very far removed from what it actually is.
And there are also people who know real violence and like that, and that's wrong too. I've met a lot of people like that. When I started in traditional martial arts when I was, 5, and then when I was 15, I started getting more mixed martial arts. And by the time I was in college, I was deep into mixed martial arts, and I would train a lot of really seedy fight gyms with characters who had no right knowing the skills that they knew, and were very capable fighters, but we're not making the world a better place by having those skills. So,
and it is absolutely our responsibility to, the Spider-Man was right. Great with the great power comes great responsibility. That is our duty as martial artists, as warriors, to keep the world better while we're in it and leave the world better than we found it.
Yes, absolutely. Well, not to derail too much, but I am really interested in your, you said you started out in the martial arts. You had a school, you did that, but these days you're more of a writer. That is a really awesome trajectory, I think, because I think most martial artists are kind of warrior poets at heart. That's kind of the ultimate dream of a martial artist, is to be able to make that transition from, the kicking and the punching, the physical skills, to more of the mental gains. How did that transition happen, and how were you able to become a successful freelance writer? I was an English major in college, so it's really close to being near and dear to me. And I've tried to write many books and failed many times, because it's incredibly difficult to have that determination, like you were talking about, where you start and finish it, but it's something that the martial arts definitely teaches.
It's very, very hard to do, especially if you're running a school, because that's already a full-time and a half job. Excuse me there. It's already a full-time and a half job. Right. But the story starts when I was 4 years old. One of my earliest memories is drawing lines on a piece of paper, pretending that I was writing the story in my head. So this has been something that I've been doing my entire life. Got a lot of, very good feedback from early teachers, early adults in my life about how apparently I had a talent for it. And I got published a couple of times in middle school, had my first paid article, and that in high school, was making a little bit of money on the side in college, was told by some college professors, dude, you should do this for a living. In high school, my two best friends, one's dad was a New York Times best-selling nonfiction author, and the other one's mom was a technical writer. And despite all of this, I went into an entirely different career for the first half of my adult life.
Wow.
And went and ran a karate school. But during that time, I was writing all of my ad copy for my blog. I had a column in the local paper where I would talk about defense, safety, fitness. I was contributing to Black Belt magazine. I had a couple columns in Natma Maya's little that little thing they send with their monthly packet. I had a couple of columns in there. And so when I started thinking about, okay, you know what, I really love running the school, but I haven't seen my kid really in months, and time to make a change, I had that portfolio already there.
Yes, sir.
And then through the martial arts and the fact that, the martial arts teaches you how to set a goal, reach that goal, and be disciplined about that goal, and to do entirely unreasonable things to attain that goal. Yeah. I was able to turn that into a full-time, job over the course of the first year.
That's awesome. So if you could write about anything, whether it was going to be marketable or not, I mean, what is your preferred mode of writing? What do you enjoy writing most?
Well, really, it's most of what I'm writing now. There's, I've got a couple of corporate blogging jobs that, they let me eat food and sleep indoors, which are two things I like a whole lot. But I have some young adult adventure novels out there that feature martial arts.
What are those?
Yeah, they're called the Bushido Chronicles. It's a urban fantasy kind of thing. High school wrestler finds out that he and a bunch of martial artists from his high school are part of this war against demons, and they run around and fight demons and save the day. Kind of fun, right?
What is it called? You said
it's called the Bushido Chronicles. The first book, Coming Home, is out now, and the second one, God, we've changed the title so many times, but it's like Changing Roads, Changing Streams, something like that. Which is all of that plus time travel, comes out later this year. So those are a lot of fun. I do a lot of writing in the tabletop role-playing game industry because I'm that much of a nerd.
Wow, you come to the right place, because we have our own staff Dungeons and Dragons campaign going on right now.
Outstanding. It has always amazed me. Well, actually not really, but the number of nerds in martial arts.
There's a synergy there.
Nerdy industry. Yeah, there's so many of us. So I do a lot of that. I'm actually, once I get off this call, I'm going to be finishing up an adventure for the Achtung Cthulhu game, which is World War II if Cthulhu was real.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I got tapped to do some writing for their North Africa campaign. But so that's fun. And then I'm right now, my agent and I are going out on, what I did was I took you remember the old choose your own adventure books?
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm taking that concept and using it to apply safety concepts. So, if you help the nice man go find his puppy, turn to page 8. If you go get your dad instead, turn to page 12. That sort of thing.
Gotcha.
Right. And so we're really excited about that, and we think that that'll get picked up.
That's a great idea. Absolutely.
I hope so.
Yeah.
So I'm fortunate enough to be writing about most of the things that I like to write about. And of course, this book is another piece of that where I'm doing a little writing, but mostly I'm editing and I'm collating or curating all these stories about, the far more important, maybe important is the wrong word, but skills we can use to keep each other safe far more often than we'll ever be called on to use a block or a punch or a throw or a lock.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Jesse, do you have any questions for Mr. Brick?
I do. So a lot of the times, as we're hosting these conversations, I'm back here like, okay, filtering through all these things I have going through my brain, saying, what do I really want to cut to the core of once we get to this point? And my big question for you is, as you've been moving through this most recent project, it sounds like with Safest Family on the Block, you have already for a couple of years, maybe a few years, been digging into these fundamental safety concepts, right? And saying, okay, like how does this impact not just myself as a martial artist, but the people that I am most intimately connected with? And that's, that is already such a special leap from some of the ways that we focus on martial arts as individuals. And again, my question for you is, how has, with this most recent project, your relationship to the martial arts changed as you've been moving through it? Do you feel like, you've been talking with these people, you're writing this book, and now as we're nearing the release date, the publication date, do you feel like there's a solid kernel of like, this is really something that you have taken to heart and taken home here?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really good question, by the way. But for me, it's kind of, we've flirted with that theme about just expanding my understanding of self-defense and what I'm doing about self-defense, where, even 5 years ago, I was going to seminar after seminar all over. If there was a martial arts seminar within a reasonable drive of here, I was there and I was loving it. And I'd spend however much money I could afford to go to these seminars. During that time, there wasn't a single time I went and even re-upped my first aid AED training. So now I am looking at, getting that stop the bleed training for trauma medicine, looking at maybe even going and getting EMT certification, not for a job, but just so that I have those skills to keep my family and my people safe. That improv class I talked about, almost everybody who's listened to this show has at least started to read The Art of War.
Yeah.
How many of them have read the 4 Agreements or the 5 Love Languages?
Yes, sir.
Right. And so I spend a certain amount of time training in self-defense and martial arts every day. And absolutely the physical skills are part of that. But also I'm not just reading The Art of War or Ed Parker's book or whatever, but I'm also expanding that into medicine, especially a wilderness medicine and, where there is no doctor and emergency medicine, and all of those things, because those are also self-defense. And not only are they self-defense, they are self-defense skills we are far more likely to use. You guys are in Texas, I'm in Oregon. Some people might make some assumptions that are probably wrong about how we feel about guns. But one thing that I have become very tired of is people who will lovingly describe every single firearm in their multi-$1,000 collection, but can't tell me about their smoke detector. Right.
Yes,
or they have, or they can't tell me the last time they made sure the medicine in their first aid kit hadn't expired.
Yes.
And I love this like totality, holistic approach to the martial arts, where it's like, everything is the martial arts. That is really core to us and what we do here at the school in a lot of ways. And I won't get into it, but for me, the thing that I love the most about the martial arts, it's hard to say the most because I love so many different things about the martial arts, but one of the things that I really love about the martial arts is you can never know it all. And the better you get at striking, maybe the worse you get at your grappling. The better you get grappling, the worse you get at striking, because you just can't do it all, and there's just so much more to explore: weapons, philosophy, history, kinesiology, sports medicine, massage. I mean, there's a million things, and that's what's so exciting about it, for sure. And I think, a lot of young martial artists don't start doing that, but later, as we grow and we develop, we start realizing, wow, this is all interconnected, and there's a lot more to learn.
Absolutely. Yeah, please.
One more time. So the holistic concept is something that, myself kind of stepping into early adulthood, just trying to really keep my feet on the ground and make sure, okay, like, what am I really trying to set up here? That this concept of self-reflection and self-care, but also specifically setting goals to care for the people around you and to ensure that those relationships you're building, whether they're at home or at work or in the community, And it doesn't even have to be with people. You know, I've been thinking about, what is my relationship to food in my life right now? What is my relationship to sleep? What is my relationship to driving, right? You know, as a young man, I like to go fast on the road. And it has been repeatedly drilled into me through looking over at my girlfriend, like, hey, maybe pull back on the speed right now, because she's like, oh, we're going a little too fast, right? And that's, you know, those little reminders.
And you have this moment like, we're going a little fast, honey. Yeah, but it's okay because I'm a ninja.
That's right.
Right?
That's right. Just watch how I avoid these cars.
Famous last words.
And
no, absolutely true.
Taking all of that and saying, how is it that I'm approaching life and building out my life from that perspective of self-defense, right? And it's not, you know, in listening through this conversation, just from being back here today, a question that comes up is, well, you know, isn't that insulating? Like, oh, like you're tucking in. Like, I want to make sure that there's padding around me so that I'm not in competition. And I don't see it like that at all. It's no. Like, I want to be as open and as confident as possible in every way that I can be, and know that when those situations arise, I'm here to meet it, whether it's through that improv, as you're saying, or through the verbal judo, or through, you know, if necessary, that physical exchange, right? Confrontation or not, like, if you have to use your body, knowing going into it, you know, okay, maybe I can, you know, today I might be able to do something here.
I think you hit on something that's hugely important, and a lot of martial arts teachers have felt a little bit of that pushback once in a while, where if you're not somebody who knows how to stay safe, then you sometimes perceive people who do approach life from that position as being afraid, of being insulated, of being armored. And I think early in our process of training in self-defense, we kind of do that. I think it's like the pupil stage of becoming a martial artist. But when you are safe and you know you're safe, or you know how to stay safe, that does, as you say, it opens up opportunities.
Yes.
And I'm a very safety conscious person. But a few years ago, I took my 5-year-old and my 15-year-old, and we went and lived in Malaysia for a year. And there's no way that I would have done that if I didn't feel that I was competent to travel in some kind of sketchy parts of the world with 2 children. Although I'll tell you, after these last 2 years of interviewing these real experts, man, I had no idea what I was doing. We lucked out.
Yes, sir.
Oh man, I thought I knew what I was doing when I started that podcast. Oh man.
Yeah. You got to be careful. When I was a kid, my dad took us all over the world, and we went to some you know, very poor places. But there's poor places, and then there's poor places that are dangerous. You know.
Yeah.
Got to be really careful you don't go there, and sometimes hard when you don't know the area very well. Yeah,
because that's the trouble. Often those are adjoining neighborhoods.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one thing that came up when you were talking that I remembered I wanted to say back when you were talking, sir, was this idea of an improv class being so important to developing those social skills. And I was like, man, someone can make $1 million if they developed a good course that was like a improv class for martial artists.
Yeah, combat improv. Full contact improv.
Yeah. Since you came up with the idea, what would be the one thing that you would teach in a class like that, do you think?
So it wouldn't be the specifics that I teach, but it would be how it's taught, right? Because you have the skills that you teach to defuse things. These are well known, they're well taught, they're well orchestrated by people with more intelligence and more experience than I have. But what happens in an improv is you get together for a couple hours a week and you practice them in a competitive environment where you're under pressure. It's like sparring.
Yeah.
And then if you do improv seriously, you then go do it in public. Right. And so you're starting to get that, you know, the pressure testing where you try to get yourself adrenally charged and then try to do the technique and you're all because you've forgotten how your fingers work because you have an adrenal dump, right?
Yeah.
And we've got all these different ways that we train to try to get accustomed to that adrenal dump so that we can handle things.
Yeah.
And then improv is a way to do that with your verbal skills.
That's awesome. That's
So yeah, it's not the curriculum I do. It's just the method of teaching. That's just, there aren't very many other places that you have the opportunity to do that. It's like when I was running my school, a lot of parents would ask me about why I have kids spar. You know what? And for me, it's really simple. That when you are sparring, first of all, it's nothing like a fight. It's not even anywhere near like a fight. But the two things when you start to spar is, number one, that person standing across the line from me is a trained martial artist, and number two, they're about to start trying to punch me in the head.
Yes.
And when you're 7 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old, that is the safest, most effective way of teaching a kid how to deal with legitimate fear that I've ever encountered. Because that's scary.
Yeah.
And getting up and doing improv conversations in front of 80 people you don't know, 3 of whom came just to heckle you, that's scary.
Well, it reminds me so much of what we do in our leadership program, which is our instructor training program here at the academy. We do a lot of role play in the office, on the floor, and then the role play is really training for the real battle, which is teaching the class in front of the kids. And, a lot of times new people to our leadership program will go, oh yeah, like, I got it. Like, we'll do some role play on the floor of how to teach a class, and we'll do a class of miscreants, like kids who are misbehaving and stuff, and they got to use their social skills to basically control the kids and get them back in line. And they'll kind of be like, the first day, they'll be like, yeah, okay, I got it, and then they'll go to teach class and they don't got it. They'll just be like thunderstruck, like, oh my gosh. And then they'll come back and be like, okay, role play, like, this is really important. And that's exactly what you're talking about, but doing it for that violence. Like, someone comes in at you right up in your face, and you're not going to be able to do it in the moment. I remember my mom, she would always say, my mom's a really little lady, and she is quite like vicious in a good way. Like, she doesn't back down, but she would always say, well, you don't know, I would protect my kids like a raging wombat or something. I just come out and just be ferocious. And it's not just my mom. I mean, I remember so many kids growing up would say stuff like that. Well, you don't know, when I would go to fight, I would be like a monster. Well, you don't know that, actually. And that's probably not what's going to happen. You're probably going to freeze up and do nothing. And the best way to even begin to know is doing that role play, like you're saying.
Well, professionals have a saying about violence, and that is, we don't rise to the occasion. We fall to our level of training.
Yeah.
And although there are exceptions, and I'm glad there are exceptions, that's everybody I know who has seen violence multiple times agrees with that statement. And so we need to train our physical skills. We need to train our verbal skills. We need to train our awareness, sitting down and not just kind of puffing our chest and sitting in our corner so we can see the door, and making sure all of our friends see us do that, which is, you see people who are like that, and it's kind of annoying. But also sitting down and playing a game with your kids about, hey, in this room, if I weren't here and you needed help, or if I had a heart attack right now, which of these people would you go to for help? Which of these strangers would you approach for help? Or when you're sitting with your buddies, okay, close your eyes, where's the exit? And just these little things, that training and practicing and gamifying all of these different safety skills, and not just the sparring and the martial arts training, which is of course the most fun, but it's some of the least effective if we do our jobs right, because we'll never be called on to use it. I mean, we're middle class, middle-aged people who live in the suburbs. We're not in peril of being attacked.
Yeah. I heard some scary statistics though. I was looking at mortality. Number one ways people die, and it was wild. Okay, the number one way people die is accidental injury, just like tripping over their feet and stabbing themselves in a protractor. I mean, I'm joking, but something like absurd like that. And number two way is they kill themselves, which is also really sad. And this is in, like, I can't remember the exact demographics, but like 5 to 35 or something, that younger kind of generation where people are
when natural causes when natural causes aren't happening to us yet. Right.
And then the third one, which I was horrified to find out, was murder. Yeah. So you do need to be aware of what's going on.
Although the numbers on that, because this has been a thing I've gone deep on the data on.
Okay,
again, I'm a nerd.
The
numbers on that are a little misleading because it's not because people between 5 and 35 are getting killed all the time. It's because they're just not dying very often.
Oh yeah,
in general, right?
You know, when I was a kid, I used to worry about like, oh my God, maybe I have a brain tumor in my head or something. I need to get checked out. But the thing is, you're much more likely to just fall and stab yourself with a protractor or kill yourself from depression than you are to have something like that kill you.
Exactly. And and the homicide spike is almost entirely 16 to 26-year-old men doing stupid things.
Yes.
Right. And it's also very easily avoidable if you're a martial artist and you train to be confident and you're able to walk away. And of course, for accidental death, single most important physical self-defense skill you're ever going to learn is your break falls.
Yeah. Well, yeah, especially when you get older. I always tell my older students, because they don't like falling. It hurts as you get older and whatnot. But hey, guys, you got to start practicing this now when you're in your 50s, so that when you slip on the ice when you're 65, 70, you don't like break your hip and die or something, or hit your head on the ground, because it's a really important skill.
And it's one we'll actually use. I've been in a fight since 2004, but I fall down twice a year whether I need to or not. And so
right? Like every day, don't you?
Yeah, no, it's bad. Very recently, actually not that recent, it's been about 4 years. I was leaning against the rail at this cabin up in the mountains outside of Bend with at that point he was 6 years old kid leaning against my chest, and the rail broke. And it was 5 feet down to a wood pile.
Oh my God.
And I did like this 3-stage break fall against the post, and then against the deck itself, and then against some of the stuff. I got a little road rash here, a little bruise here. Kid wanted to do it again. All right, but that is self-defense skills that saved me and saved my kid.
Well, sir, I've got a lot of respect for that, because I'm pretty good with my break falls, but I wouldn't trust myself doing a backwards break fall, falling backwards off the deck, because that's just good way to break.
I wouldn't have done it on purpose. I'm here to tell you, but yeah, wow. But it's another example of that's a physical self-defense skill we learned. But I think most martial artists I know have one story about a patch of ice, or they were carrying a box and didn't see the thing in the pathway, where they would have gone to the hospital if they hadn't done their 10,000 reps on the break falls.
Yes, sir. That is awesome. That is very wise. And those are the little battles that we were talking about, that really matter, that you're going to be exposed to every day. You're going to defend yourself once or twice in your life if you are unlucky, but you're going to use those kind of skills all the time. And Mr. Brick, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. I mean, I think you have some really illuminating things to say about violence and how to de-escalate it. I'm really excited to read your book and learn more. And I know you interviewed so many great people that, I know so much about. I've read Rory Miller's Meditation on Violence, and I'm excited to hear what he has to say in your book. Any closing thoughts, Jesse, before we kind of wrap things up?
I think, thanks again for coming on, Mr. Brick. And we definitely have so much that I'm interested in from this conversation. This is one of the first times I've really sat down and as we're talking, I'm taking notes, and I'm what do I really want to make sure I can dig into after? And my note card is full of just all of these references and projects that you've worked on and projects that we've referenced and talked about a little bit. So it's been really great having you on, and it's been an awesome conversation.
Well, thank you, Jim. I really appreciate you having me on. It's my goal. You mentioned Rory Miller. I always get a little frustrated with Rory because I can't read one of his books without going and then spending $100 on more books that he mentions and recommends in his book. Right?
Yeah.
It always costs me $100 to have a conversation with Rory. But that's kind of a life goal. If I can make people curious about things, then I figure I've done my job.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Because I ain't that bright, but I listen to really smart people and I remember what they tell me.
That's very true for me too. Well, sir, thanks so much. Until your next book, we'd love to have you back on and we can talk more about that. Or if you ever want to talk about something, we're here to listen, to learn, And you're a great conversationalist. It was good talking as you are writing, I'm sure. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
If you enjoyed that podcast, please consider liking and subscribing to our YouTube channel, as well as hitting the notification bell. We offer in-person, group, and private lessons at our facility in Kyle, Texas, as well as virtual lessons anywhere in the world. If you'd like to learn more about our programs, you can find us online at risingphoenixtkd.com.